Welcome to This Explainer. Listen, what we're doing today, it is absolutely not your standard timeline of dry dates and textbook summaries. Not at all. Instead, I need you to treat this like a classified dossier, a file of buried secrets, forgotten empires, and underground resistance. We are going to treat the history of the Philippine archipelago like a massive, centuries-long cold case.
Because right off the bat, we have to ask a genuinely chilling question. What happens when an entire civilization is deliberately erased from modern memory? For the longest time, the widely accepted narrative literally painted the pre-colonial Philippines as just a scattered collection of primitive islands, just sitting there, waiting to be discovered. But as we dig into the actual archaeological evidence, we realize the story isn't just slightly off, it's a total fabrication.
So let's dive right into layer one, the erased empire. We are opening the files on a highly sophisticated maritime network of gold, warriors, and kings that long predated any European colonizers. The official story pushes this idea of sparse, unconnected settlements. But the hidden truth? These islands were the bustling epicenter of the maritime Jade Road. We are talking about a massive transoceanic trade network that operated for 3,000 years. 3 millennia. These highly mobile fleets were out there trading white and green nephrite jade, porcelain, and gold all across Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and Taiwan. Let's be clear, these were definitely not just tiny, static little villages. Take the Kingdom of Bul, for example. Described by early missionaries as literally the Venice of the Visayas, Bul was this incredibly wealthy, highly mobile, floating wooden city-state. But like any good thriller, there's a violent twist. This incredible floating metropolis was ruthlessly attacked and completely destroyed by soldiers from the Sultanate of Ternate. The survivors actually had to flee all the way to northern Mindanao. It just goes to show that early Philippine polities were rich, constantly shifting, and frankly, engaged in some truly ruthless warfare. Now, to protect all that wealth, you obviously needed fierce protectors. Enter the Visayan maritime warriors. These were heavily tattooed men known to the Spanish as the pintados, or the painted ones. And their inked bodies? They weren't just for show. They served as cryptic flesh and blood ledgers. You couldn't just, go get a dragon or a serpent tattoo. No way. These marks were strictly earned. You got them through bravery and confirmed kills in combat. They were the elite, ultimate enforcers of this erased empire. And the physical evidence of this forgotten golden age is absolutely undeniable. Take the Laguna copperplate inscription from the year 900 CE. It's an actual legal document, clearing a debt measured precisely in gold, which proves they used advanced mathematics. Then we have the golden Tara of Agusan and the Kanaras statues, these stunning Hindu-Buddhist gold figures that point to really deep cultural ties with Greater Asia. And of course, the massive troves of nephrite jade. This wasn't some primitive society. This was a civilization of advanced metallurgy, global commerce, and complex legal codes. But perhaps the most stunning revelation of all is hidden right there in the burial data. As the records show, the operations of the Maritime Jade Road coincided with an era of near absolute peace which lasted for 1,500 years. Think about that. From 500 BCD to 1000 CE, there is virtually zero osteological proof of violent mass death in the burial sites. The violent expansionist warfare we so often associate with this era, that really only began when foreign cultures of expansionism were imported into the archipelago much later, in the 15th century. Which brings us to layer 2, Shadows of the Crown. So let's fast forward to 1565 and the start of the 333-year Spanish colonial period. But look, we're not going to focus on the conquest itself today. Instead, we are looking straight at the underground resistance. Take the 1587 Tondo conspiracy. Think of these conspirators like a classified hit list. The old aristocracy, including guys like Maga Salamat, organized a massive secret alliance spanning multiple regions. They even conspired with the Japanese pirate captain and the Sultan of Brunei to violently overthrow the Spanish crown. But there was a leak. Salamat was executed, others were hanged or exiled. And just like that, the first major underground resistance was completely crushed. But here's the thing about resistance. It didn't actually die, it just went deeper underground. Which brings us to one of the most blood-soaked years in this history, 1872. 3 Filipino priests, collectively known as the Gomburza, were falsely accused of sedition. The colonial authorities brutally executed them by garrote. It was a highly calculated act of psychological warfare, entirely meant to terrify the populace into submission. But guess what?
It totally backfired. Instead of silencing the people, it triggered a full-blown revolution. Because out of that immense trauma, the ultimate secret brotherhood was born. The Katipunan. Founded by Andres Bonifacio, this was not just your average political group. It was a clandestine, completely underground society built on encrypted codes, secret passwords, and actual blood compacts. By weaponizing the people's fury, the Katipunan grew entirely in the shadows. They bided their time until they were finally ready to violently tear down Spanish rule in 1896.
And now we open Layer 3, the cold cases.
Because historical investigation like this just wouldn't be complete without opening the final file on some seriously lingering mysteries. So here is our first major cold case. We know, based on foreign records, that an incredibly powerful Philippine kingdom called Mai existed. An Arab chronicler even noted that back in the 800s, Mai actually waged war against the massive Chinese empire. But where exactly was it? The exact geographical location is basically a phantom. Some scholars absolutely insist it was in Mindoro, while others point directly to Laguna. It's a legendary kingdom that fought literal empires, and we still haven't pinned down its capital.
Our next cold case involves a totally fatal internal split. When the Philippine Revolution broke out, that underground Katipunan we talked about, it completely fractured in Cavite. Let's break down the two sides of this. On one side, you have the Magdiwang faction. Led by Mariano Alvarez, they were fiercely loyal to the founder, Andres Bonifacio. On the other side, you've got the Magdalo faction. Led by Baldomero Aguinaldo, they served as a powerful, heavily armed rival center of gravity. And this intense, bitter division, it completely set the stage for a massive tragedy. Track this rapid, brutal timeline with me for a second. In 1896, the revolution kicks off. By March 1897, the tension is so high it forces the Tejeros Convention. And in this incredibly shadowy, highly disputed power struggle, the election suddenly shifts control to Emilio Aguinaldo, completely bypassing Bonifacio. And then, just 2 months later, in May 1897, Andres Bonifacio, the very founder of the revolution, is executed for treason by Aguinaldo's own soldiers. It is an absolutely chilling climax, really the ultimate betrayal. A revolution devouring its own founder right there in the mountains of Cavite. The details surrounding Bonifacio's sham trial remain one of the most painful, hotly debated cold cases in all of Filipino history. And it leaves this haunting lesson that honestly resonates even today. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies aren't the colonizers across the ocean. Sometimes they're the rivals standing right next to you. And that actually brings us to the ultimate fatal flaw of the archipelago, which is summarized perfectly in our source material. To quote the text, the multiple states competing over the limited territory allowed its conquistadors to effectively employ a strategy of divide and conquer. Throughout this explainer, we have seen this theme over and over again, from pre-colonial interkingdom warfare to the deeply fragmented factions of the revolution. Ambitious internal rivalries were consistently weaponized by outsiders. So, we've uncovered a lost maritime empire of gold, we've tracked the bloody codes of an underground resistance, and we've mapped the internal betrayals that derailed an entire revolution. But if history is truly written by the victors, we really have to wonder, how many more forgotten kingdoms and buried betrayals still lie hidden beneath the archipelago, just waiting to be dug up? Keep questioning the narrative. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.